Hi folks, I'm Steve. You've seen me before and you're seeing me again because I am the understudy for Kristen Parisi from HR Brew, who ran into some logistical issues. So she won't be here, but I'm stepping up. And I am going to turn it over to our wonderful panel. Could you please introduce yourselves briefly and tell us what you found to be the most rewarding about your current role and what keeps you personally motivated and engaged in your work? Should we start on this end, I guess?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Dishington. I am a director in our consulting practice at WorkHuman. I think for me, aside from the amazing team that I work with, what keeps me motivated and passionate is the variety in my role. We have an opportunity to consult some of the world's most iconic brands, and every organization is so different. I was chatting with some of the panelists earlier. Just the opportunity to look into and observe different company cultures is really interesting to me, and the opportunity to influence those cultures is very motivating.
Sounds good. Julie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Gu. I'm the VP of Revenue for Prezzee. You might have seen our table out there. We are a digital gift card solution. We work with decision makers like you and companies across the country to reward and engage employees, as well as drive sales acquisition efforts from a marketing lens and loyalty and retention for consumers. As a single mom to 2 girls under 10, I know all about rewards and incentives. I live it day in and day out, in addition to my professional life. So, for me, looking at the agenda today, this is definitely the best topic and I think the funnest one too.
I attest to that too with a 3 and a 2-year-old every day. But Boma Anyaogu, Vice President of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Compass Group. We are the world's largest food service company, and I support our second largest account, which is Amazon. What I find rewarding and engaging about my work, I'd say, is possibility. I think we employ about 500,000 employees, so when I think about the impact and opportunities that we have, that's engaging. And if I'm being very, very real with you, and just in relation to this topic, they pay me well to do my job.
That's great. Hi, I'm Sunita, Braynard. I'm head of global compensation and mobility programs at Under Armour. It's a wonderful company, wonderful brand, and I'm sure most of you, if not everyone, knows here of the brand. What keeps me motivated and engaged to do what I do is really being able to create and design programs and solutions that tend to strike a balance between what the employees want, what people want, and what the management wants. So be able to make sure that not only employees are happy, but management is happy as well, and we are keeping an engaged workforce across different companies, and I've worked in many different industries and geographies, and it's really wonderful to see what are some of the similarities that we can leverage from one company to another and one industry to another.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Davis, and I'm with Amazon. So I don't have to go into the spill of who we are and what we do. We do a lot, and we do it everywhere. I lead diversity learning for talent acquisition. And as a global company, having the opportunity to ensure that our talent, our recruiters, our sourcers, that they are equipped to really focus on underrepresented groups. So from a global perspective, whether it's an APAC or EMEA, focusing really on those who would not have an opportunity to enter into tech is very rewarding. And it's a life changer for some people. And so that's what really gets me out of bed every day.
All right, thank you all. And now on to the more sort of policy questions. Sunita, if you could go first, what are some of the best ways to drive like a culture of appreciation and recognition so that people kind of have the instinct knowing what to do, but maybe also some structure to it, both like monetary and non-monetary ways?
Thank you, Steve. I think that's a great question. And something that we've heard many times today is it's not something that we can say one size fits all. And I think the culture also informs what kind of recognition or rewards program will work for a particular company. So I would say, first off, any kind of program that a company wants to put through or wants to design has to be embedded in its culture. What are we trying to drive? And is it meaningful to the employees, to the people of the company? And is it tied to the values? And I think another important element is for it to be driven through the business leadership, because even though it is tied to people, it's not really an HR initiative. So I think that has to be the fundamental thought process around instituting a program. And then, of course, we can think about whether it's, depending on, of course, affordability, but also what we want to encourage through the program. The design could be non-monetary and monetary. I've seen that, at least in one of the few companies that have implemented some of the recognition programs, it's peer-to-peer really drives recognition and engagement because it makes people feel valued about what they do. And it could be day to day. It doesn't have to be something extremely big. There are a lot of points that, of course, our previous presenter, Bree, covered about. It's also about celebrating moments that matter. That could be professional versus personal. And in terms of professional, how we recognize could be peer-to-peer, manager-to-peer, and it does not have to be monetary. Monetary can be tied to more, I would say, more initiatives that are project-based. And of course, it could be a point system, badge system, if you were to use a formal system to reward and recognize to employees.
Thanks. The peer-to-peer thing is interesting because your peers are not required. It's not part of their job to recognize you necessarily, whereas your manager, your boss is like rewarding you because you did something right, and it seems like it has real meaning. Any follow-ups on the culture of recognition? Julie, would you like to talk about that?
We work with brands and with different company values, different missions, but I think at the heart of it, it's always that personal touch. So when we talk about peer-to-peer, whether that's colleague to colleague, whether that's manager to direct support, I think it's really about the personal touch. So the appreciation is what makes you feel good in the moment. The personal message is what makes it memorable. And then when you pair that, whether it's a gift card from Prezzee or, or some other monetary or non-monetary item, that's what makes that lasting impact. So you really kind of have to think about rewards and recognition as a cycle, and there are different stages to it, and you want to make those different stages snackable so they're easy to repeat, that they're memorable, and then what is that lasting impact that you want to have? Is it that I gave you $5 towards that Instapot that you've been talking about, that you've been wanting for the last 6 months? So now it's not going to be about you remembering the $5. It's that every single time you use that Instapot, you're going to remember that your colleagues paid attention to your interests outside of work.
Another piece, if I could just pile on
Please.
to that, I think we often tend to think about recognition from the vantage point of the recipient. It's going to feel so great for that person to be recognized. What we need to remember, and what our data show very clearly, is there's a benefit to the giver. So that's another really important piece of why we believe peer-to-peer is so important. Now you have a compounding benefit across your organization that really starts to tip culture. Because every time I show up and give a moment, or I nominate a fellow employee, I see a benefit. I see a boost to my engagement, and I start showing up with a mindset that an owner would have, right? I want to see what's going right and call it out.
Boma, you want to add anything to add to that?
I do want to circle back to something you said that I think is important, where we said it's
Please
not
do.
a part of the job to
Yeah.
recognize. But I think that is the premise of culture. It's building behaviors, belief, and practices. And what recognition and rewards really connect to is teamwork. It builds trust. It's connection. So I think it's bigger than initiative. It's bigger than a program. It's really what the premise of culture is, and it gets people in that mindset of I see you, you see me. That I think is really, really valuable.
Great point. Thanks for adding that. maybe Naomi, could you go next on this one, which is, tell me about, or us, about building human workplaces that recognize the potential of every employee, and especially through managers who know their people, or should know their people, and can then, personalize it and customize that a little more based on what they like and need.
Absolutely. I think it assumes that managers know their people. It assumes that managers are having those important check-ins, either weekly or bi-weekly, or that there's some established cadence where we're getting to know our teams and their likes and dislikes. Our company's co-published a series of reports with Gallup, and one of the key elements that makes recognition meaningful and impactful is that it's personalized, right? So if we don't know our people and we give out a team award and it's all the same for each one of them, it can almost backfire. It's like, that person doesn't even know me. They gave me a bottle of wine. They don't even know that I'm like having dry January. Not that I had dry January. The point is, right, it can feel almost insulting in a way if we don't know our people. So there was a beautiful comment made earlier today from another panelist about the way that we have check-ins, and the way we remember is the 3 H's. How's your head? How's your heart? How's your home? And when you understand that about a person, when you understand what's going on, you can be much more tailored in the giving of recognition, whether it's a comment or a point-based award. It will land much more efficiently and sends a message, right, that you're seen, you're really valued for who you are as an individual.
Mm-hmm. Sabrina, would you like to add to that in terms of like managers and knowing what their people need in terms of recognition? And it might be something that has to do with opportunities as well as recognition, and you're focused on learning and development, things like that?
Sure. So we focus primarily on manager capabilities, and one of those is showing appreciation for the work that employees do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one of our structured programs for recognition, but it should be the culture of our company. It should be the culture of a team to show appreciation, even if it's verbal. And then, what was the second part? Sorry.
Just adaptability, I mean, in terms of making it more individual and personalized and things.
So definitely offer choices. So the data tells us that employees want their leaders to know them and who they are. So we shouldn't have a structure in place where leadership cannot make changes, where they cannot adapt, where they cannot make just-in-time recognition for their employees. So it's equipping leaders with the tools that they need to be adaptable. And then another point that we focus on is feedback, data. Ask your employees what they want. Mm-hmm. Take the surveys and actually listen to the sentiment that's displayed there, because, again, I think someone on the panel mentioned, if you make a mistake in your recognition system, then it backfires. And you've basically wasted a lot of money doing something that your employees don't value.
I mean, a mistake like failure to listen or respond and just, like that.
Yes, that mistake.
Boma, this one's for you. You've mentioned like the fact that every employee should be treated as more than just their narrow role or whatever their role might be, and that they actually have an ability to impact people beyond their role. And what can be important too is service. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that might work?
Yeah, we have a large frontline and employee population, who actually interacts with the customers. And it is easy for them to see themselves as just a cook or just a cashier or just a ... So it's really, really important that leaders, managers, a company, we highlight the impact of their role. So you are literally shaping someone's day. Sabrina, you are our client. So we talk about the Amazonians and how you can literally inspire them to do great work, right? Food is a big part of companies' culture. So we really take the initiative to highlight the extent of an employee's job, the gravity that it has in the customer that we serve and the service that we do. And again, just tying this back to recognition, when you do great work, small or big, we want to make sure that we highlight that and let them know that it's going a long way. How
do you close the loop on that? So when you have somebody who's frontline, they're serving people, and they do something really generous or warm or friendly or something, how do you make sure that gets back around to that worker, knowing that, yes, you did that and we know, and we caught you doing something right, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we actually have several mechanisms in place to support that. So we have something called VOC, which is voice of the customer, can go either way. But when a customer does highlight an employee by name or something of that nature, we make sure that employee sees that. We have recognition months that we'll do. So we have like Barista Month, we have Cashier Month. And so when something goes right, we allow the customer again to highlight them. We do kudos. So it's a very simple, send a note and then we highlight it. We do newsletters. So we do several different mechanisms in place to make it easy and quick. Some of the feedback that we've heard from managers is that it takes a long time for us to do recognition. Like we have to wait towards the end of the month to cash this in or that in. So we're trying to do things where we can capture it in real time and where a person can in that moment say like, oh, great, I gave my best and someone recognized it.
Julie, Naomi, would you like to add to that in terms of like detecting where somebody did something right and closing that loop so it's just not something happening in a vacuum?
Something that I like to kind of put a framework around, something that's easy to remember. And I'm Chinese, so what I'll say is you never want to forget the rice, right? When you order Chinese takeout, does anybody ever order Chinese takeout without the rice? No. So what that means professionally, rice, rewards, incentives, celebrations, engagement.
I like it. That's beautiful.
So if you can hit on, you're like similar to your 3 H's, right? It's a similar framework. If you can make sure that you are rewarding action, then you're incentivizing behavior, you're celebrating the moments, and then that engagement piece is how do you take it from the individual to the group and make sure that everybody is participating. So looking at your structure, looking at rice, thinking about what you can be doing on a daily, what's the daily habit that you're practicing for rice versus the weekly, versus the team dynamic, versus the department dynamic. That's a great way to now all of a sudden you can see how all the different touch points can engage and how all the different people can work together.
I love that. And when you can scale that, because you talked about a little bit, not just the professional aspects of who we are as people, but we're all hearing about bring your whole self to work. If there's a way also to recognize who someone is, not just what they do, when you scale with a platform that can honor things like, oh, you adopted a puppy, or you achieved a professional certificate while you were working, and the social group around you can add on their congratulations, some of those awards are the most meaningful. And I spoke about variety earlier. It's a joy to see how every organization brings those other non-work elements to life. My personal favorite to see is sporting triumph. And so if someone achieves something amazing outside of work and the group comes around to celebrate, wow, you've been training for a marathon, that also says something so important about who that human is, right? And how they like to be celebrated and who they are as a whole human. I think those moments really matter when they're celebrated socially, and it does inform culture.
I just want to add, being a
Please.
food service company, Julie, we are going to start saying don't forget the
I
rice.
know, right?
Okay.
Exactly. Sorry, not keto friendly, but.
No, it's catchy and memorable. It's great.
So good.
Okay. The one thing also to do, I think, is to make it easy. So a person doesn't have to sit down and necessarily compose an original, handwritten thank you note or something. Are there ways to just kind of sort of help people with their positive impulse and help them fulfill that quickly? Sunita, I wonder if there's a way that you encourage that or make it easy, and then I would go to Julie and Naomi on that too. But what are your thoughts?
In terms of making it easy to recognize
Yeah, so that a
achievements.
positive impulse can be
Yeah.
fulfilled.
I think one of the things that I'm thinking about in terms of when we say peer-to-peer recognition, we know that it's more impactful when it's timely, it's instant, and it's what we had covered previously as well. It's specific. It doesn't have to be a huge 2-3 paragraphs. It could just be how you saved the day or you worked extra hours during the weekend which they didn't have to work. So it can I think it can be really meaningful when it's almost like heart to heart, really meaningful to the person who's writing it. It could be a simple email to start with. And of course, if there are other platforms that the company has, they can post it on that, make it more public. If they don't, I think it's okay because they can still have within the team recognition. I think, I would say manager to the employee, it could be something similar. So it's instant, it's meaningful for the teammate, and then of course it can be collectively, maybe, 3 months down the line or 6 months down the line, if they're consistently working on a project that's leads up to something that's very impactful to the company, it could lead to maybe a monetary award, which could be something like, I wouldn't call it spot bonus, because spot bonus could be more, again, we are saying more instant, but like a project bonus. And of course, if the company has a formal recognition type program, then again, you can think about how to assign points to that particular achievement. So it's kind of like structuring it in a different ways of achievement. So there are multiple ways to do it, but I think the easiest is recognize instantly, make it specific, make it meaningful, heart-to-heart connection. That really goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Now, here's a question, and not to make it political or anything like that, but making your teams and your individuals feel like they're seen and they're understood, it's kind of in the same spirit of inclusion and et cetera, that other word. And I'm just wondering, how do they fit together? I mean, really, people want to be included, and that seems like an important part of recognition. Who would like to tackle that one? Would you like to tackle that?
Sure, I would love to. I think at the core of inclusion is feeling like you're invited to have a voice. Mm-hmm. So if as a part of your recognition efforts, you can invite your entire work community to have a voice and to use that voice, and I'll blend this answer with the previous question around how do you make it easy? Mm-hmm. So yes, you're invited to participate, and here's easy access, whether it's by putting that in everyone's hands through a mobile app or embedding it as we do with Teams, so it's right in the flow of work. So when you have the thought to recognize someone, you have an easy way to do it. That sends a message, in my view, of trust from the organization to the group to say, we trust your view into this activity and we want to hear you kind of trumpet it or shine a light on your friends. So that is a very practical way to be inclusive, by inviting everyone's voices to the table.
And I'll add to that the belonging piece of it. So it's rarely a part of the conversation. So actually like this when we think about rewards and recognition, but just by doing that, it's saying that your ideas were impactful here. So that's a form of inclusion. Your work style was impactful here. So that's a form of belonging. So I think they're tied together, whether we frame it that way or not. Mm-hmm. And that word, diversity, it exists at all levels in all types of ways. Mm-hmm. But when you put them all together, it really adds value. And I think the recognition and rewards is just like the cherry on top.
Mm-hmm. I would also add that, in addition to what we just shared, that in essence, one of the design principles of a recognition or awards program is that it has to be fair, it has to be consistently offered, available to all employees.
Good one.
And that in itself means it's inclusive of all employees. It cannot exclude anybody. So it's not even a political term. I think it's more about the term that we are using is we want it accessible equally to all employees. And them being, because really at the heart of recognition, we want people to be seen, to be recognized for what they did, for their contribution, so that they can ultimately be more engaged. And that's what the companies want. They want their employees to feel engaged, which enhances productivity, and then in effect really helps the company in the long run. And there are actually a couple of really wonderful books, if you ever want to read them, The Carrot Principle and Leading with Gratitude. It's all about empowering managers to be able to recognize teammates and how to boost productivity.
And I'll just add one thing as well. Diversity, part of diversity is diversity of thought. And so as a global company, we have to be careful not to always recognize and reward the same behaviors. And the behaviors in America that we reward are very different than the behaviors maybe in China or in Germany. So a recognition program needs to be localized. And again, it needs to be that we are rewarding people where they are succeeding. And that may look different for every person that works there.
Here's a question a little bit about adaptability in the sense that we realize that everybody likes different kinds of recognition. Some people would like a gift card. Some people would like money, just cash or something. Like other people want to be famous in the departments beyond their own department. And so different people have, and other people are just would be, they blush and they couldn't take it. So how can you kind of get a feel for that? Is there any mechanism to get a good handle on that? Julie, would you like to take that on? And then anyone else who's sort of learned the trick of sensing people's feelings about that?
Yeah, I think as a direct manager, I think you just ask. I think that's been my kind of tried and true way, is just to ask, how do you like to be seen? How do you like to be rewarded? How do you like to be recognized? And, to your point, there are people who are, I work with some developers and engineers who are painfully shy and, would like to have their work be seen, but have the work itself be enough. And so that's one of those ones where there are times where I will sit in a meeting with them and I will say, hey, so let me just play that back to you. This is exactly what happened. This is how you supported it. And I'll read back the notes I took, and he or she will say, yep, that's exactly what happened. I'll be like, do you mind if I just share that out in the channel? From my perspective based on the conversation we had. And in that way, I'm recapping an important milestone or meeting or movement or progress that we had in a project, but I'm doing it using words that they feel comfortable with and kind of putting a voice to something that they maybe feel uncomfortable kind of expounding upon themselves. Mm-hmm. So I think, finding where people are comfortable and kind of engaging them where they're at and kind of their comfort level is something that I found to be really successful, and just asking them, is that okay? And just checking throughout the way, too.
That sounds very straightforward. Just ask. Any other thoughts on that, though?
I'm gonna probably give a spin on it.
Sure.
And how I see things happen. I'll speak for my organization. Sometimes people just don't think that deep about how would you like to be rewarded. And I've seen it. I'm guilty where I'm like, I have a great idea. I think they will love it. It's recognizing them, surprising them. And sometimes I think the thoughtfulness goes a long way. To your point, Steve, not everyone wants to be famous within a company. Some people want something that's a little bit discreet. But what I have found consistently is just the thought of getting something, especially if it comes as a surprise. Even if I didn't ask that employee, I feel like it's been very, very well received.
When recognition is social, when that feels appropriate, it also serves as a communication channel to the business. If you have a platform where you're showcasing what good looks like, it is an invaluable tool to onboard new hires. Because now, when you go to any new place, even when you're a kid and you go to the first day of school, your antenna go up and you're quickly assessing, what does good look like here? What are the cool kids sit? How do we really behave here? So when you can see on a feed somewhere what good looks like and in detail how that looks, that's a beautiful onboarding tool, especially in hybrid and remote onboarding scenarios where you need to quickly learn, how do we do it here? What's the culture actually? So just a plug for the social piece, but where it's appropriate. And I would also add, just as a caveat there, in the instance that someone doesn't want to be publicly celebrated, there should be mechanisms built in for that person to flip on or off at will. Mm-hmm. Right.
One thing I want to ask about, and it's been in the news a lot lately, in moments of crisis, how can managers or leaders expand on, think a little bigger about recognition and rewards? And, wildfires, your house might burn down, or it might be something much more mundane. Their person's car broke down. It sort of feels like, is that benefits? Is that recognition of their needs? Is it? And I'm just, yesterday I was visiting a friend, a journalist, who had something very touching happen to him. His son passed away, and no one likes to lose a child. And his manager put out a note to all the journalists, it was at the Washington Post, what had happened, and he got all these cards and notes and things, and that was very gratifying for him. So I'm just wondering, how do you how can you encourage managers to kind of rise to special occasions, not just meeting your KPI or whatever it might be, but something extra or some vulnerability in your life or something like that, or running the marathon? I don't know.
Yeah, I think recognition of moments that matter to an employee or to a person is really important, and we know that usually we think of recognition in terms of contributions at work, in terms of their job duties, or if they did something above and beyond. But it is true that recognizing a person as a whole being also means recognizing the personal moments that really matter to them, which could include, of course, anything from birthdays to anniversaries to wedding, birth of a first or second child, but also some of the sad things that happen, if they lose somebody dear to them, and just giving them that, we can call it recognition, but helping them know that there are teammates, there are other people around them who do care about what they are going through, whether it's happy times or good times. And that's really going into building that culture of belonging and, again, engaging with them so they start feeling that they're not in it alone, that they're doing it together with the company, with the people around them. And whether they're working or they're not working, they know they've got, the people have their back. And when they're ready to come back, or if they're already working, that they can take some time off to recuperate from a tragedy and then come back all renewed and be ready to help other people around them do the same.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I think that's such a really, really great point, and I'll share a personal story similar to this. So last year I lost my mom, and I shared it with my team. I'm like, hey, this just happened. I'm gonna be offline for some days. And the response was, take the time off, don't respond to anything, whatever you need, we will fill in for you. And then a couple of days later, checked in, are you okay? I hope you're not logged on, we got you, whatever you need. And I feel like in that moment, I'm like, okay, they are really here for me, they support me, and they're living true to the term of a team. And so it's interesting that we don't look at it as recognition, but that is a form of recognition, and I've seen it personally. Like I said, I can attest to it, and I've also seen them do it for a colleague who also had a new baby in the same way. So I really love that.
So people can be sort of taught as part of the culture, as we were saying, to call on their own, humanity or instincts to freelance on this a little bit, in terms
I think they have to have the space for it.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
they're able to do it
Yeah.
without any repercussions,
Yeah.
I think it becomes a repetitive thing and people feel
Good point.
enabled to do it.
Would anyone like to add to that? I was going to go on to about how do you know it's working? But anything else?
I'll add one thing. At the enterprise level, companies can, and I'm happy to say that my company does this, in times of disaster, whether it's war or wildfires or hurricanes, having a mechanism in place to support your employees and their families without question, and giving managers the ability to make those decisions. And when you show that you value your employees personally, then not only do they feel engaged with the company, but they also realize that you don't just recognize them for the work they do or their output, but you actually recognize them as a human. And that goes a long way with inclusion and belonging. Yeah.
Well, now I want to ask, how do you know that you're successful and test this culture? Is it, we all know about employee surveys and pulse surveys and things like that, but is there anything you've tried that you found you got a handle on it, or you found something surprising that you didn't know? Anyone?
I think in most cases you would see some of the results in engagement surveys, which I think is what most companies use as a gauge to see if what they're doing within the company is working or not working. Specifically, questions related to questions about their plan to stay with the company and how they feel engaged, do they feel do they feel a sense of belonging to the company? And so obviously it's not specific to just rewards and recognition. There's a lot that goes into it, but I would say that would be one of the pillars to build that, as we are saying that recognition is a pillar to build a culture as well. And quite honestly, you can, look at it closer to home to see how the teams are performing. Do we have some of the managers have more high-performing team than others? And is it because, obviously there could be so many variables, but one could be that most high-performing teams might be collaborating better than others. And because they have that sense of working together, working and belonging, and they celebrate together, and of course, they support each other in times of need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Other thoughts on that?
I think at WorkHuman, we're fairly obsessed with data and metrics. So we set down a path in every instance where we're thinking about what are your goals and ambitions culturally and for the business as we embark on building this program. And recently, you'll have heard us talk a lot about human intelligence, which is the advancements, the rapid advancements that AI has been able to serve up to leaders. So we know it's working when what's good for people is good for business. And you start to see the impact of that in a very demonstrable way, after a number of months of the program being live. And AI has really helped to catapult some of our ability to deliver that back to leaders against the metrics that they set out to achieve, whether it's, performance or engagement or what have you.
My favorite question that I think many of us have taken Gallup surveys, but my favorite question that's asked is always, do you have a best friend at work? And early on in my career, I kind of scoffed at that question because I didn't really quite understand what that meant. And as I've progressed and I've become a people manager and I've become somebody who now works with people managers and HR decision makers to really understand, what employee culture is, how do you drive engagement, I think that's a critical question, because if you have a best friend at work, it means you have a sense of belonging. It means you feel included. It means you're excited to go to work because you want to see your best friend. So that to me is a qualitative, yet I think a pulse quantitative question that if you can kind of draw that trend line over time, you get a really good sense of how happy people are.
Anyone else on that one? All right, I have a question about, do you think that recognition programs can help cut through the hierarchy, that bosses and minions and all the different parts? And the reason I ask is because there's a term that I don't often hear used in HR circles, but my wife uses it a lot because she's a psychotherapist, and the term is significance. If people are made to feel significant to other people, it's a big deal. If they're made to feel insignificant, it's just as powerful the other way. So do you think it kind of can help? So whatever role people are in, low or high on the totem pole, that this kind of can help, and why would you think that?
I think so. I think everyone wants to be recognized and rewarded for their work, regardless of their level. So from the CEO to the admin, I think everyone wants to. So I think it at least allows you to understand that it's not specific to a level, that it's agnostic. But another piece and something that I'm doing with my division is connecting the hierarchies, if you will. So for example, we have a Women in Culinary program, and we had 2 of our employees who were selected out of the North America, the region, and our CEO was going to have a meet and greet with them. And so if you think of your sous chef, and then you have the highest level who wants to just have 30 minutes with that person, it absolutely is going to inspire significance in role. It's going to let them know that, oh, wow, he or she is accessible. And I think that it cuts through that hierarchy to say your work, no matter the level, deserves to be rewarded when you've done great things.
Okay, well, thank you. We have 1 minute left, which means it's time for our lightning round of just a few words from each of you. Shabreen, could you tell us, if people here could have one quick takeaway on just how to recognize, create more of a culture of recognition in their company? Is there just each of you sort of a bumper sticker?
Inclusion.
Okay.
And what that means. Everyone should be included in the process.
Okay.
I would say make it specific, meaningful, and heart-to-heart connection in how they, even if it's a simple note.
Specific, I like that, not just good job, yeah. Boma?
One word, valuable.
Okay.
Don't skip the rice.
I love the callback, that's great. Naomi, would you like to wrap it up?
I think keeping the human at the center, right? Your own humanity and the humanity of those around you. Can't go wrong.
All right, well, let's recognize our panel.
Thank you.